But ancient wisdom has been around for thousands of years. If this didn't work, they would have stopped using it a long time ago. But guess what? Ayurvedic medicine, the All Indian Ayurvedic Congress, which is like their medical organization, is still today the largest medical organization in the world. So it's like, if it didn't work, it wouldn't still be here. You know what I mean?
Welcome to the world of energy, where science meets spirit. Ancient wisdom merges with cutting-edge knowledge, and the possibilities for a healthier, happier you are endless. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Big Ideas. Today, my guest is the incredible Dr. John Douillard. He is one of the top Ayurvedic doctors in the country. He has a website, lifespa.com, where he shares incredible information about the science and the ancient history of Ayurveda and how they are coming up together again and again in recent studies, which he dives deep into. And today we got to talk about some of my favorite topics: longevity and death and dying. And wow, is this a wow interview? He is so brilliant and so generous with his wisdom and so fun to talk to. I hope that you enjoy this as much as I did. And I'm already hoping to get Dr. John back here again. Enjoy. Welcome, Dr. John Douillard. I'm so excited to have you here on our podcast, Big Ideas. I don't think I know anyone with bigger and better ideas than you. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Lauren, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I want to dive right in. I had the pleasure of having Dr. John teach in our advanced training program that we just concluded. And he brought up so many incredible ideas that I wanted to explore some of them with you, the public, because many of you know on this podcast, I've talked about I don't know, it doesn't feel like the nicest way to call them the bro boys of longevity, but that's kind of what they've been called by other people, not just me. And Ayurveda, you could say, and maybe John, correct me if I'm wrong, but you could say it is a practice of longevity. Itself is one of the longest continually practiced medicine systems in the world, over 5,000 years. And a lot of the practices from 5,000 years ago are being studied today and scientifically validated. And so this whole longevity thing that's the flavor of the month right now, I mean, you've had a handle on that for so long. So I wonder if you just would talk a little bit about your thoughts with longevity and Ayurveda, and then I'm going to go in for some specific questions about some of these longevity brothers and what they say, and see if you concur with them.
Well, that sounds like fun. So Ayurveda, Ayur means life, Veda means science or truth, which I like the definition of truth because that never changes. And that's sort of the problem with everything in our culture, but at least in the realm of health, is it keeps changing. One diet's good, and then the next diet's better, and the next diet's better, and no one knows. I mean, does anybody really know what they should eat anymore? Does anybody, I mean, it's just so confusing. You should be a carnivore, vegan, pescatarian, you name it, no one really knows. Because science alone can prove whatever it wants. But what I try to bring to the table is time-tested wisdom that's been around for thousands of years and modern science. And I kind of feel like if you have both of those, that's a good place to start. And that's what we do at LifeSpa. That's what I provide. We write articles for free for folks to make that happen. But the thing is that in Ayurveda, longevity is sort of part of the whole umbrella of Ayurveda. I mean, one of the branches of Ayurveda is a branch completely studying longevity. And the reason they wanted you to live a long time was because you don't really complete the human potential if you don't live a long time, because there's cycles of life. Just like in spring, there's a spring, which is nature's new year, and then there's a summer, and then there's a winter. Well, in our life, there's a spring, which when you're a kid, you can roll downstairs and do it again and love it. But when you're in the winter of your life, over 60, you don't want to roll down any stairs, and you definitely wouldn't do it again, you know? So there's the spring of your life, there's the summer where the days are long and you're making a living and you're raising your children, and you're hopefully making a dent in the world. And then there's the winter of your life, which is, you know, the latter part of your life. Well, science shows that a UCLA study showed that at the latter part of your life, the last third of your life, not only do we, and I'm in that, I'm like 69 right now. So I'm in that point where I want to find God before it's too late, which is like they call it the wisdom years, where you can be wise or dumb, right? And dumb means do the same dumb thing you've been doing for the spring years and the summer years. And now you're doing the same dumb thing in the winter years, like, you know. But what was really cool about the study was at UCLA was that not only do we want to find God before it's too late, we have the physiology, the hardware to be able to perceive subtle energy much better than we did when we were in our early years, in our midlife years, right? So that's kind of like the whole point, is that in the latter part of your life, this is when you begin to thin that veil between the physical and the spiritual, refine your subtle perception. You know, you do energy medicine. This is where those folks who are doing that are really have the capacity to do it better than they did when they were younger. A lot of people have it gifted along the way, but generally speaking, this is the time to refine that perception and perceive subtle energy and to really go explore that inner space. And that's the missing piece in the longevity puzzle, which we'll get into. But let's talk about just the precise. So Ayurveda was like, you got to live a long life because those last years really matter in terms of full human potential. That was the reason, not just to live to be 180 because I did it. It was more than. The branch of Ayurveda that is dedicated to longevity is called Rasayana. Rasa is the study of the lymphatic system. Ayana means the study of. So the study of the lymphatic system is the study of longevity. Like, what? We don't know anything about the lymphatic system. All we know is when you get cancer, they take stuff out. That's all we know. But in the medical journals, which is where I kind of live, there is volumes of research on the lymphatic system. None of it, except when you get cancer, you take lymph nodes out, has reached medical practice. None of it. But in Ayurveda, it was the first thing they evaluated. The very first thing they looked at was how functional is your lymph, because your lymph's trying to do a couple of really important things. It's the largest circulatory system of your body. It's trying to take out the trash of every cell of your body. It's trying to carry your immune system, like really important. And it's trying to deliver fat as baseline energy to every cell of your body and fats as baseline precursors to make your own hormones with. So if you're thinking about HRT, the reason why you probably aren't making them yourself is because your lymphatic system, which was a fat delivery system to help make those fat-soluble hormones with, isn't available to you. It's congested. So when you start doing the research into the lymphatic system, we start looking at, oh my God, this is the most important piece. It's like the drains in your house, right? If your bathtub drain is clogged, you're not going to turn on the faucet. If your toilet is clogged, you're not going to flush it. It's all about how well we get rid of the trash. And if we do that well, and therefore, and along the way, carry your immune system, and along the way, deliver energy and get rid of the trash, man, that's like, why are we not looking at that? In Western medicine, we look at your blood, which is the faucets taking this stuff into your system. We don't evaluate the lymphatic system, which is taking this stuff out. And if you can't flush your toilet, you're not going to, if you can't get the drains working, you're not going to turn on faucets. So we look at the blood and go, oh, you have high cholesterol and you have high blood sugar, you have high blood pressure. So we're going to fix that for you. It's almost like that was a gas gauge. Oh, you're low on testosterone and progesterone. We're just going to give you more and fix it. That has nothing to do with why that gas gauge is low. So Ayurveda was like, let's evaluate the drainage systems first, because things could be backing up because your drainage systems are compromised. And if we fix the drains, a lot of times the blood starts to look a lot better. So that is the kind of fundamental piece of the longevity puzzle, which really I don't know what you would call them, the bro boys. I have never heard anybody talk about the lymphatic system. But this is the ancient wisdom, volumes of modern science. And I've written a ton of articles, but I've got so many more in the pipeline about the deeper research that's just starting to come out, because they're just beginning to understand what the lymphatic system is really all about. So that's sort of like the elephant in the room, the missing piece that nobody talks about. Yeah, there you go. It's a good intro to longevity and Ayurveda.
It's a great intro. That's a great intro. And I love that you talked the missing piece, and it's the elephant in the room, because I have my own missing piece, elephant in the room of the longevity, but it wasn't lymph. And so I'm curious. I mean, Peter Attia, who's kind of at the forefront of this longevity research, his book has been on the bestseller list forever. He was just on 60 Minutes, and he's talking about high protein, rucking, like high metabolic activity. Supplement list is just off the hook, and taking even like off-label things that haven't been proven, but he's like, I think they might increase longevity, and so and endless testing, and this is what a lot of the longevity researchers do, and it's diet and stress. They talk about stress, but nobody's talking about lymph. So how is that? Like, why is that happening? How do we get you on 60 Minutes to be talking about the missing piece of this longevity puzzle? Because if it is that important and that powerful and that time tested, how has it been so overlooked?
There's no way to measure it. You can take blood out, you can look at it, send it to a lab, and then they can give you an analysis. The lymph, they still haven't been able to figure out how to measure it. That basically, it's that simple. So it was a lot easier to pull blood out, look at it, we can evaluate it, analyze it, but the lymph is different. It's a moving target, as we are moving targets. You could say, oh, well, this person has arthritis, so therefore the drug that I give you has to fix, has to treat the symptom of that arthritis. But the problem is that you could take 10 people and each of them have a different reason for their arthritis. The cause could be different in each individual. So we treat the condition versus the individual, and the lymph system is evaluating the individual. So is the blood to a certain extent, which is why some people why the debate on LDL cholesterol is like all over the place. Well, all the people all the centenarians have high HCl levels. They have, and they live a long life. So therefore LDL doesn't matter. Peter Attia is all over lowering your LDL to 30 or some really, really crazy low number. I love him. I follow him. I read his book. I follow him. I love what he's saying. He's just like hardcore Western medicine, taking the best of Western science and really vetting that science really, really well. What I wonder is that, he's a medical doctor. He himself said he never learned anything about nutrition in medical school. So where is his time-tested clinical practice in natural medicine, nutritional medicine? He's brilliant, and I love him, and don't get me wrong, but I just wonder if you just take the science, again, and you don't look at the time-tested wisdom or have experience in, I've been practicing natural medicine, Ayurveda for I graduated in 84, what is that, 42 years, something like that. So I've been in this field for a very, very long time. And, and I've also been looking at the science to know depth like Peter Attia. He's really, really, he deserves to be on CNN or 60 Minutes. But I do wonder if that complete focus on only the science and not looking at the traditional wisdom leaves some blanks. And that's why I love what I've tried to bring to the table is, hey, you got something that's around for 1,000 years. It's still here today. If antibiotics, which are kind of on the way out because of the super bugs that take advantage of they morph and they become stronger as a result of taking antibiotics. We wonder how long will antibiotics really last, right? But ancient wisdom has been around for thousands of years. If this didn't work, they would have stopped using it a long time ago. But guess what? Ayurvedic medicine, the All Indian Ayurvedic Congress, which is like their medical organization, is still today the largest medical organization in the world. So it's like, if it didn't work, it wouldn't still be here. You know what I mean? Now, I believe that not all of it is like gospel just because it's old. Of course not. But if you take that ancient wisdom and you have modern science, that's a place for us to dig in and really vet in that world right there. And that's what I try to bring to the table. But I think Peter might be leaving out some of that wisdom. And when you look at, Dan Buettner had on my podcast, I think he's brilliant. He's the one who wrote all about the blue zones. He goes completely against what Peter Attia says about the high protein. And the people who live the longest, they don't eat a high protein diet. They eat little bits of protein. They have a lot of beans. They're all about fiber and Mediterranean diet and all these other factors that are very Ayurvedic, by the way, because all traditional cultures lived all those blue zone principles, So I just wonder if this high protein thing, off the chart protein, a gram of protein for every pound of body weight is really where we need to be. I do agree that as we get older, our metabolism does change. And then you do need more protein as you age. And I think it's critically important to maintain muscle mass for all the reasons that Peter Attia says. And I think that's probably a very individual thing. Like I know that I was a Ironman triathlete for years. So I had big muscles. I was a tennis player, bicyclist. I had big legs. My legs aren't near as big as they once were, but I do make an effort to eat more protein and work out and keep those muscles as strong as I possibly can. So I do agree so much in that direction, but I wonder if that is really the ultimate key to longevity. What the science shows is that all that protein is going to be good for muscle mass, and lack of muscle mass is one of the leading causes of, age-related, problems, falling and having, things don't go good after you break your hip, those kind of things, So I agree with that. I think exercise and movement and staying active is probably a bigger key. I think protein is important and a little bit more as you get older, for sure. I don't know we need to go clobbering our body with protein the way they all say. I've seen these dietary fads come and go. They come and go like the wind. And Ayurveda, like I said, Ayurveda's life and truth. It never changes. They were never into this massive amount of protein. The centenarians weren't into massive amount of protein. I'm still going to hold my cards that say eat a reasonable amount of protein, and we'll see, where the chips fall. But that's what I would say is, taking a look at the combination of ancient wisdom, modern science, and look at the people who live the longest, and then make decisions based on that. But, what he says about muscle mass is critically an important piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, Walter Longo, I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but he also quotes Buettner quite a bit, and he is much more in that camp, and he has like a 5-prong approach to his way of study, not just looking at the data, but also looking at actual people who have lived the longest. And like you said, they're not eating massive amounts of protein. And so I feel like those are the two kind of diametrically opposed. It's Longo and Attia. Attia is like a ton of protein. Longo's like not a ton of protein, because the more protein you eat, the more your metabolism has to work to create it into muscle. But he also agrees with you about eating more protein as you age. And, here's another piece. You talked about the lymph not being able to be measured. And there's another piece, I think, in this puzzle that, I listened to a podcast with Attia, who I also follow. I read his book and, all of that. And in the podcast, he was saying, full disclosure, I am a part owner of this company that makes these protein bars. Okay, so he's got a financial incentive for you to eat a lot of protein. And Longo, he also sells a product, a fasting mimicking diet protocol. And all of the money from that goes into research and funding for research on food molecules and how those serve humanity. Really, he's looking for, all of the health benefits of different food nutrients. And so just right there, I kind of think, and back to your point about the lymph not being able to be measured and studied, is that also that there's not a financial way of, monetizing the lymph. Every time I get blood work, I look at my bill. It's amazing how much money it costs to get blood work. So if there's a way for them to monetize lymph studies, maybe we would start looking at lymph more. There's a huge financial piece of this puzzle that the other part of it is no one's going to know. It's like if you won or if you didn't win, because if you didn't win, you're dead. And if you won, you're like 120 and then you're like, hey, it worked. And then you die, so it's like, it's really hard to, to say who's right. We'll never know.
Yeah, I think that, you're so right. It is a pay-to-play system, and our whole medical system is monetized. It's not for the health of the people. It's just for how you can make more money. Drugs come on the market to treat symptoms, and if they had a cure, I've read studies where they actually kill certain protocols that would actually be, cures versus, treating the symptoms and keeping people on lifelong medication, which when I was younger, medicine was get on, get better, get off. But nowadays, somewhere along the way, medicines became life sentences, which is sort of interesting. I am a big fan of Walter Longo. I was so fascinated by the fasting mimicking diet, which is a 5-day protocol. You eat a very low calorie restricted diet that actually triggers stem cell activation. Well, when I read that book, I was like, wait a minute, this is exactly like the Ayurvedic cleanses. And we have and using ghee, a certain amount of fat, and rice and beans or khichdi, a khichdi diet. So I looked at the exact amount of proteins and fats and carbohydrates that he was putting in the fasting mimicking diet, and it was almost precisely the way our cleanses were. So then I wrote a cleanse called the Kaya Kalpa cleanse, because I don't know if you know Walter Longo's story, but the people went into the biosphere in the 90s, or they spent 2 years there. They came out, their organs had all shrunk, and then their organs got big again. He was like, wait, the only way that could happen is with stem cell activation. And calorie restriction that they were living in this biosphere where they were living and making their own food and not getting along, shrunk their organs. And then when they came back, they got big. So he started looking at what would happen if I calorie restricted them, and would that boost stem cells? And that's what the fasting mimicking diet was. Well, in Ayurveda, there's a thing called Kaya Kalpa, which is a transformation and this is what got me into Ayurveda. This is like the myth, right? Where people would go into a cave, they eat certain foods, calorie restriction, do these kind of cleansing kind of therapies. And this is what I heard when this is like 1981. And I was like, what? These guys live to be 160, 80 years old. And they go into the cave and their hair falls out, grows back new. It didn't happen to me. Their teeth would fall and get new teeth, new skin. And it was totally rejuvenated for the second 100 years or whatever. I was like, oh my God. So I went to India, that's one of the reasons why I went, because I was so fascinated by that. And sort of, never really found exactly that. But when I was reading Walter Longo's book, I'm going, oh my God, that's Kaya Kalpa. You can take those organs that shrunk and make them bigger. That's exactly what he's talking about. That's exactly what they were talking about. Of course, over the thousands of years, it might have gotten a little exaggerated, But the point is that that's what the original Kaya Kalpa was this activation and boosting of stem cells. So I looked at what our cleanses were, and I created a cleanse called the Kaya Kalpa. It's a free ebook on my website. You can read the whole story about the biosphere. It's right in the ebook. It's all free at LifeSpa. And just download it and read the story. And then there's a cleanse. It's a 5-day cleanse. It's also free. Just do it. And then I'll give you the exact precise Ayurvedic doses that mimic exactly his diet that's been studied, along with all the Ayurvedic retreat aspects like yoga and breathing and meditation and detoxifying your brain lymphatic system and breathing exercises and everything to create that in the cave, still the lake, create a level of deep, deep stillness in your nervous system and physiology So the body has more self-awareness, so it can recognize problems as problems and initiate a more powerful healing response, sort of mimicking with the science the ancient practice of Kayakalpa. So yeah, I love Valter Longa. I think he's brilliant, and there were so many reasons why he did. There was issues about just fasting, just flat out not eating versus having a calorie-restricted diet and getting the benefits and so on. He was all over that. I wrote articles about that, God, must be like 20 years ago now, about how fasting alone can actually create gallbladder issues. There were studies in the early 1990s that showed that just fasting can actually create gallbladder problems and issues like that. So be careful about just flat out, endurance event fasting kind of a thing. And then his research came out to kind of back it up and really gave a lot of credibility to the Ayurvedic cleanses, because that's exactly what they were. They're calorie-restricted diets that force you into fat burning. And when you're in there, you don't even know you're fasting, but you're in a fasting mimicking style diet. It's exactly what it was. Really, really cool.
Yeah, I love that. I'm gonna check that your cleanse out. I've done your cleanse many times, and I just did Valter Longo's. I bought the kit. I did exactly like I followed exactly to a T. And I don't know yet the results. I did lose some weight, which was not my goal, and I actually was unhappy with that. But they say the weight you lose is visceral fat, which is the good fat to lose. And it is very easy to follow. But I'm glad that you mapped it out through the Ayurveda lens, because I had a friend that said, can I just do this? But it is very scientific in terms of, like what you said, the macronutrients and exactly what you're getting. And so if you just try to do, I think it's 800 calories, 1,100 calories day one, and then 800 for the next 4 days. And if you just try to do that on your own, I feel like you're going to wiggle a little bit. And if you're trying to do something really scientific, I think that wiggle isn't really that helpful.
How it works when you broke it up to the Ayurvedic, in Ayurveda, you do a little bit of ghee or clarified butter in the morning. And ghee is basically the highest food source of butyric acid, which is the number one fatty acid for gut health, which is like, wow, how do they know to process the butter into ghee and give you something that was such a superfood for your gut, right, and your microbiome? And you take that's your fat source. And then you have khichdi, which is your rice and beans, which is your carbs and your protein source. And I think for the 1,100 calories, I think it was like 2 3/4 cups of khichdi for the day. That's how much you got. And then the ghee doses, are I forget what they were. They were higher than what we normally give. So, in our regular cleanses, because a lot of people can't gobble down that much fat or ghee because our gallbladders have been so congested with all the junk food that we eat, that we have to, a lot of times we have to help people get gallbladder and liver function back and optimized again before they can really take advantage of the advanced dosages of ghee and the real deep cleansing effects of what Ayurveda had predicted, and science has now backed it up. These ghee cleanses, by taking ghee at higher doses and then having a no-fat diet during the day, which is exactly what the fasting mimicking diet is when we do it this way, activates something called lipophilic mediated detox, where the fat of the ghee gets into your gut, goes into your tissues, and attaches to fat-soluble toxins. It's lipophilic and pulls those toxins into your gut, and then they get flushed out of your gut. Well, the study showed when people did that for 7 days in one study, and the first people who didn't do that, the people who did the cleanse, got a 46% reduction in their PCBs, forever chemicals that were banned in the 1990s, but still here today, and a 56% reduction of pesticides compared to the folks who didn't do the cleanse. There were also other studies showing it detoxes heavy metals and so on. So we want to get those fat-soluble toxins that store in our fats, like our brain, and pull them out. And that's what the Ayurvedic approach was about. So then when you overlay the fasting mimicking approach, you get that stem cell activation. I was like, wow, now we're rejuvenating the body. It was just like, And very few people know about the Kayakalpa ebook that we have, because it's a little bit, it's calorie restricted. You're eating 2 3/4 cups of khichdi a day and some ghee in the morning. It's not a lot of food. And most average folk can't do it. So we have our short home cleanse, which is like an introductory 4-day cleanse. And we have our Colorado cleanse, which is all kind of malleable so people can adjust it to their tolerance. But the Kaya Kalpa cleanse is really the goal. It's really the one that really takes you into those original Vedic dosages to get that real powerful stem cell activation and the real deep detox of these chemicals that store in our fat. It's pretty cool.
It's really cool. Okay, we're going to drop a link to that in the show notes for this. And my next cleanse, I'm just going to say it, is going to be that one. I even actually have a pack of khichdi left from the last cleanse I did with you. I don't know how I ended up with an extra. Maybe you provided it. But, one of the things I want to pivot to, because you talked about this in this cleanse versus Longo's. And Longo's cleanse is guided. You've got support. So, if you have questions and all that. And then there's just a little bit of guidance, basically doing no exercise, no intense exercise, which was very not challenging for 5 days, but I don't want to do it again anytime really soon because it sort of interrupts my whole training and all of that kind of thing. But, and so what they say is, you can do walking and yoga. Okay. So low level, practices, but you're saying in this cleanse, you also give guidance to the spiritual aspects of doing a cleanse. And one of the things that you mentioned is also mentioned in James Nestor's book, Breath. He's one of your students, and he took your work and ran with it and expanded it and did this deep dive into lung capacity. And one of the sentences, I don't know if I have it right here, because it's highlighted. It's the only sentence in the whole book that I highlighted, is that the indicator of longevity is lung capacity. Now, I think that breathing practices are also not really talked about a lot in the longevity, in the bro boys. They'll call them that lovingly, bro boys, because we do love them. But that they don't really talk about breathing practices unless you're going to consider like VO2 max and that kind of stuff as breathing practices. You've got a lot of experience with that. Can you talk us through the difference or similarities between, deep yogic breathing practices of the kind that Nestor was talking about that is an indicator of longevity, and this sort of VO2 max gold standard of exercise?
So the book, one of the original Vedic books, it's called the Shiva Sridhaya book, and it's a book about breathing. And it said, this is where that whole concept says that the fewer breaths you take, the longer you live, that everybody is gotten at birth a certain number of breaths, and how that you waste them or spend them is how long you live. So we did, which is interesting, when we did our first research on nose breathing versus mouth breathing, and we published studies in the International Journal of Neuroscience, we found that when they were exercising with their mouth open, they were breathing at 48 breaths per minute. About 24 high school athletes that were doing this. They came back the next day, they did the nose breathing, and they did the exact same work, 100 watts of resistance, pretty maximal. And their breath rate wasn't 48, it was 14. Doing the same exact work. So it was like, oh, wait a minute, I can do the same work at 14 versus 48. That's crazy. And when they were at 14, their brain went into an alpha state, their brain waves became more coherent, their fight or flight nervous system didn't go to 100% fight or flight, bear in the woods, chase me up a tree kind of a thing, which is how exercise is and how life is in our culture. In our study, the one when they were breathing through their nose, their fight or flight system only went up 50%. And the parasympathetic, which usually zeroes out when you puff and exercise, it stayed at 50%. So the two opposite nervous systems were coexisting. And that's what I call the eye of the hurricane. The calm and the winds together, coexistence of opposites. This is a law of nature. This is what solar systems do. This is what atoms do with nuclei and electrons and protons spinning around a silent center. Hurricanes, winds around a silent center. We have a silent center, which we ignore a lot in our culture. And when we actually start to tap into that, then we have the bigger the calm, the bigger your silent center, the more powerful the winds. The Vedas said this thousands of years ago. The number one, if you read the Bhagavad Gita, which is not really a Vedic book, but it's sort of like a really incredible story based on Vedic literature. And it said something called establish being, perform action, yoga style Kuruk Mani. It really has two messages, which I think are really cool. One, first establish being, find that silent center, and then perform action from the silent center. It's like pulling back a bow. If I have pulled back a bow and I'm moving this thing, no silent in the center, and I shoot the arrow, you are never finding that arrow. It is never going to be found. I shoot, and I know you lose many arrows that way. But if you pull back the bow and establish being, become silent, and then take action, it's transformational. So that's the goal, is to take action from that silent center. And that's what I call the eye of the storm. The bigger the calm, the more productive your wins, not only in exercise, it was just a model for stress, but in life, how we can take that calm with us. And I think that's the fundamental piece of the full potential puzzle, is to find that calm and then build the wins around it. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And it is a very ignored piece of our culture, that finding stillness. And to your point of the goal of aging is to find God, or to find your spiritual center before you die, then that's where we need to be looking for it. If that's not even the right word, looking for it, experiencing it, is in that stillness. It's not in the busyness, right? It's in the stillness. And so if we don't spend any time there, we don't have a relationship with that state of being, it makes it even more difficult to find.
So let me tie in some of these real quick here, Lauren. What James Nestor took that research we did, and he kind of talked about, it was one of the first books he read that he told me got him inspired to write the whole book, was that we proved that you could be like dynamically active and composed and calm at the same time. That's what I was in search of the runner's high zone experience. And I had an experience of what the runner's high zone experience by going to meditation retreats, where I did sort of what Walter Longo said to do. This is back in the early 1980s, where I would just do yoga, breathe, meditate, then do another round of yoga, breathe, meditate, and then eat, and then do yoga, breathe, meditate, eat, sleep. No exercise. They wouldn't let me run. They wouldn't let me do anything. I had to just do nothing except yoga, breathe, meditate. It was driving me crazy. But when I came out of that, I was shot out of a cannon. I started competing at a much higher level, winning medals in the South Bay. It was the early triathlon years. I started having an academic level of bandwidth that blew my mind. Like I had just a massive capacity on every level that I never experienced before. And that's what got me hooked into sort of like, what is that? I really want to understand that. And then I wrote the book and published studies, Body, Mind, Sport on breathing. And now I continue to take this deeper dive into breathing and longevity, and all roads lead to one place in the Ayurvedic longevity and Western science place, which you said, like not a lot of talk about breathing in the longevity space. And it's about your diaphragm. Study recently with elite athletes, 91% of them did not have a diaphragm relaxing and contracting fully. Diaphragm is a breathing muscle, right? So you got to breathe well, and that's VO2 max. But guess what? The diaphragm is also, if you have low VO2 max, you have poor functional diaphragm, period. That's the reason, okay? So we try to beat the body up by exercising harder to get VO2 max, which works, but it's based on the old model of stress your body and recover, and stress your body and recover. And every elite athlete knows that you can only stress your body so long. We'll squeeze out world records in their 20s, but by the time they're in their 30s, they're out to pasture. We are not trying to get longevity from the get-go. We're trying to win gold medals in the get-go and get as much performance we can. But the longevity aspect is not about winning. It's about this beautiful grace of experiencing, yourself, creating a level of composure and calm. The bigger the eye, the more powerful the wins, having that dynamic activity and composure and calm, that runner's high peak experience in all aspects of your life. That was the beauty of it. And that creates a level of inner awareness, self-awareness. And that's the longevity piece, where the body has this internal composure and calm. I know it's like crazy Vedic talk, but the reality is we do know what the runner's high. We replicated it and published our studies to back it up. And it all is about your breathing. And guess what? your diaphragm, which is not functional optimally in 91% of athletes, is the number one pump of the body's lymphatic system. Like, who knew, right? And that's the Ayurvedic approach to longevity. So the number one pump for the lymph, which is taking the trash out, carrying your immune system, delivering fat as fuel, supporting the production of all your hormones. And all of that is pumped by your lymphatic system. And if that lymphatic system is compromised, pumped by your diaphragm. And if your diaphragm is compromised, your lymph will be compromised. You'll have poor immune response to an immune event like COVID. We sucked basically at that. Studies showed that long-haul COVID early on was directly linked to congestion of the brain, lymph, and lymphatic systems, which dump 3 pounds of trash out of your head every year while you sleep. And if that brain, lymph, and lymph system is congested, the studies now show it's linked to anxiety, depression, cognitive decline, inflammation, infection, poor sleep, and autoimmune concerns, where the master computer doesn't know how many fire trucks to send to the immune event in your body because it's congested, can't take its trash out. And that creates can create an overzealous immune response, which is an autoimmune response. So long-haul COVID was caused by congestion of the brain lymphatic system because the diaphragm, which is the pump of the cerebrospinal fluid, which is the brain-washing fluid, was completely compromised during COVID. But you never heard that because they don't talk about, there's no medical application of the lymphatic system, of the brain's lymphatic system. But Ayurveda talked about breathing techniques and specific ones to free the rib cage and get the diaphragm functioning, which is your pump of the brain lymph, pump of the lymph around your belly, but showing to lower your blood pressure faster than the Western medication, and showing to reverse heartburn, GERD, reflux, and indigestion. In 15 studies buried in the medical journals, if you go to the doctor for a heartburn, do they tell you you can breathe away your heartburn? But in their medical journal, it says, you bet you can. But they don't tell you that. This is like crazy, right? But this is the beauty of ancient wisdom now backed by science, and bringing that together and go, you know what? And I think I told you the story when I was teaching to your class, where I went into a restaurant and there were like 3 or 4 elderly folks coming out of this restaurant through like a bunch of double doors, and they were having a real hard time. Their mouths were huffing and puffing. They were very frail and fragile, and they were having a hard time. I was helping them come out, and I was like, gosh, if someone would have just told them that if they would have breathed for 5 minutes a day, that to strengthen their diaphragm in a specific way, it would reverse their age-related cognitive decline. It would wash the brain and waste out of their brain. 3 pounds per year we dump out of our head. But if you're not breathing right, your diaphragm's not working right, or you're not sleeping right, you're not going to get the trash out of your head. You're going to have age-related cognitive decline or some type of neurological concern as you age. You're going to have high blood pressure. You can breathe away your high blood pressure. That's been well documented. You can reverse that heartburn, GERD, reflux, and indigestion, and your need for all the Pepsid and omeprazole and all that can go away. Women with breast cancer have more congestion of the anterior diaphragmatic lymph nodes than folks who have good diaphragmatic function or don't have breast cancer. The diaphragm is the pump of all the lymph specifically around your belly. So all that extra weight around your belly and hips, that's lymphatic congestion. As the studies show, and I'll quote them, if you don't break down your protein and your fat, okay, what's that mean? Gluten, dairy, nuts, seeds, grains, beans, legumes, nitrates, oxalates, gorges, and lectins, phytic acids, all the stuff that I think the bro boys, you said, they say don't eat, right? Well, all those things, studies show if you don't break them down properly, they will go into your intestinal tract. They'll be too big of a molecule to get into your blood, like gluten, for example. They'll go uptaken not into the garbage can, but that's not the toilet. They get uptaken into your lymphatic system around your belly, and they congest your lymph, and that's your gut immunity. And that creates compromise of gut immunity. And then it goes into your skin lymph, and you get rashes. It goes into your brain lymph, gives you brain fog. There's a mechanism for why you feel bad when you eat those foods. And it's not the food. I mean, yeah, glyphosate and pesticide obviously are bad, but it's the inability to digest those foods. That's the problem. That's causing this overwhelming onslaught and irritation of the lining of your gut. They end up into your lymph, And now your lymph's trying to get rid of the trash in a storm of waste that was never meant to be the way, because you were supposed to break those foods down. So the idea is that if you were to strengthen your digestion, then you would be able to eat those foods. And studies show that folks who, let's say, because we're bubble wrapping our diet. That's what everybody's doing. Just don't eat, don't eat, don't eat, don't eat. And that'll solve your problem. We blame the food. The wheat's bad. The dairy's bad. The beans are bad. The lectins are bad. It's crazy. Those harder, this is a really important last piece. Those harder to digest foods create a bro word. I never heard the term bro, but I'm liking it. Is hormesis. Hormesis means that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Those irritants, the gluten, the casein in dairy, the lectins, they're all irritants, and they irritate the lining of your gut just enough to create gut immunity. But if you take that away and bubble wrap your diet, you don't have a reason for gut immunity. Studies show people who eat wheat, people who are gluten-free but don't have to be, people who eat the wheat had 4 times less mercury in their blood than people who were gluten-free but didn't have to be. People who ate wheat had significantly more good bugs, less bad bugs, and way more killer T cells than the folks who were gluten-free but didn't have to be. And I can go on and on and on and on about those studies comparing wheat eaters versus non-wheat eaters, right? It's not the wheat. It's your inability to have the stomach acid to break down the proteins, inability to have the bile flow in your liver because of all the junk we ate that clogged up our bile ducts and created bile sludge. That doesn't let the proteins and fats be broken down. They end up in your lymph and they clog up your lymph, which is the longevity system. And if you can't breathe because you're so stressed out in your life, you don't have a pump either, and you're pretty much screwed. So those 2 things, if we can fix those 2 things, man, you're talking about upstream aspects, not to even mention the spiritual self-awareness, interoceptive receptors on your diaphragm that are basically not functional when your rib cage and diaphragm are like a cage. So a lot there.
Wow. A lot there. I love that. I love that essentially energy medicine, yoga, and Ayurveda, obviously sisters, but deep breathing, we do a lot of lymphatic working, neurolymphatic reflex points to stimulate the lymph. And we do some techniques to actually free the diaphragm. And then, of course, with the ancient yogic practices of breathing to do similar diaphragm expansion and breath expansion and all of that. Yay. Protein doesn't even need to be part of the conversation. It's like it's already built in to what we're doing and validated, which is just amazing. Okay, I could go on and on about this too, but I do want to pivot while I still have you here to eventually 160. I want to live to 120. That's my goal, 120. But I love 160. I love 180. And eventually at some point, though, we will cast off this mortal coil. And so I want to talk a little bit about Ayurveda's view of that, because there's so much there. There's so much about grief. There's so much about death and dying and how to die well. So maybe before we get into grief and Sadhaka Pitta, because I want you to talk about that, it's so powerful. But can you talk a little bit just about Ayurveda's views of dying? Like, what are we meant to do? I know we're meant to like find God towards the end, but like, I mean, at the very end, you know, I just read Atul Gawande's book on being mortal, right? And it talks about the crisis and the horrible way we deal with end of life in this country. And there must be better ways. And his family's from India, and he talked about how his family in the old country, right, lived their final days. So can you talk a little bit about what Ayurveda says specifically about dying? Maybe a little bit about reincarnation, and then maybe tee us into Sadhaka Pitta.
So in Ayurveda, there's something called the Purusha Arthas, which means this for the soul, and Artha means for the purpose of. So, and these are what are called the 4 goals of life. And the definition of that is for the purpose of the soul. the soul is the part of us that never changes. It seems to be continuous. So this life is for the purpose of the soul. That's the Vedic understanding, which is really cool. It's like it's all about, which does make sense. If you believe that we're somehow spirit too and not just body, then and the spirit is like forever, then it makes sense that this life would be for the purpose of the part of us that never changes, right? That does make sense, because that's this part is this life in the big scheme of things is a blip, right? So the first is called Kama, which means pleasure, like the Kama Sutras means pleasure, but it wasn't mean pleasure like the Kama Sutras say, sexual pleasure. It was actually understanding that the greatest pleasure comes from giving and loving and caring others. You have to learn that lesson. It's not about me, pleasure for me. It's the greatest pleasure comes from giving and receiving. That's real briefly the first one. Second is Artha. Artha means wealth. Second aim of life is to create wealth so you can put a roof over your head, raise your family, take care of things. But the trick there is to not be attached to the fruits of your actions, not to be attached to that wealth. In the Bhagavad Gita, we talked about the first part of that book, the major book in India, which is establish being, silence, and take action from the silent center. But the second half of that book was don't be attached to the fruits of your actions. And there's really cool science behind that. I don't know if we have time for that study, but and then the third aim of life is Dharma. Dharma means living your life in harmony with the natural cycles of nature, going with the current against it. A real perfect example of that was an article, a chapter in one of the Vedic textbooks written 2,500 years ago. And it was about the cause of epidemics or pandemics. And it said that this is a quote from a book 2,500 years ago. The cause of epidemics was caused due to corruption at the highest heads of state. Like, wow, you got to be kidding me. And they said that corruption would actually filter down into the merchants, and they would start making decisions against nature. And they would slowly but surely, it would actually pollute the air and the soil and the water. It would be so dirty that the birds wouldn't even drink of it. And that pollution would begin to affect weather patterns. And you would have extreme weather, droughts and winds and floods would all come. And it would create such a level of toxicity that they couldn't even grow the herbs to fix the epidemic issue in the first place. And I'm going like, oh my God. I have an article about that. I just called about type in epidemics at lifespot.com. It's like, how do they know that? And here we are living it out today, that we're living that out, right? So that's the beauty, another example of that. But that was Dharma, lack of living in an authentic level of life with integrity. And then the final aspect, if you do all that, just by doing those things, you thin the veil between the physical and the spiritual. And then you begin to realize in this life that you are also a spiritual being living in this body. And that was the preparation for death, for transitioning into that part of you that never changes or never changed. And we somehow by living and how we live this life can help that non-changing version of ourselves evolve as well, because we're all evolving, right? So that's what it was about. And from the point of view of death, the old saying is that to the extent that someone or something affected you is to the extent that it's your karma, your action, your opportunity to take action. So all the Vedic saying, so the extent that it affects you is the extent that it's your karma, your opportunity to take action. Not about them, it's about what you can do. So when someone dies, to the extent that it affects you, the extent that what action are you going to take? It's almost like to the extent that you love them and they loved you, it's the extent that through that loss, there's pain. And the pain provides grief. There's another old saying that says that the pain, these are Vedic sayings, pain is directly across from the bliss, your true, loving, giving, higher self. And that the reason for the pain is to get your attention. So you can go to the pain, through the pain, access who you are, and let that out. Well, when someone passes you truly love, the pain is like a lot. And it forces us to feel the pain, grieve. And as we grieve, we begin to go through that pain. It's almost as if that loved one threw a hook into our heart and tugged on us and made us feel deeper aspects of ourselves by going through that pain. The person who passed in their life, I'm sure there were ways of communicating the love and the kindness and the deep love they had for their loved ones was not able to happen the way they would have loved. But when they passed, they let go of all that emotional baggage, and now they're just love. And they're having a relationship on the level of spirit or soul, a soul-to-soul relationship, tugging on us to go through the density of our mind so we can feel deeper aspects of ourselves by going to the pain, through the pain, accessing something real and letting that out. So there's a relationship, there's an opportunity during this transition for everyone to grow, to start having, in Africa, there's cultures that communicate with the elders. Well, when they're even on the path, like the Bushmen, they don't really have a lot of chit-chat, speaking words. They speak heart to heart directly, heart to heart. They're feeling-based relationships, not thinking and word-based relationships. When you think about, and I write a lot about this, when you think about self-inquiry, you've heard the word self-inquiry. Self-inquiry, which means inquiring and having a relationship with the self, which is not through thoughts, it's through feelings. Learning how to feel and not think is the trick to make all this happen. So by learning how to feel, you begin to have a relationship based on truth, heart to heart, soul to soul. So if you're having a relationship like the Bushmen, which is heart to heart, soul to soul while you're here, and then they pass, the elders are like, now they're connected to like the higher celestial realms. And we have now direct access to them in the same way we had direct access when they were here. It wasn't like now I have to learn how to feel and communicate. That communication never broke down because they had it while they were in this plane. They continue to have the same level of communication on the next plane. We are just thinking all the time, talking all the time, chit-chatting all the time, and we don't feel, and we don't respect the feeling. So when someone passes, we have to go through that pain, find that silent center again, which is where the feelings are, not the thoughts. You transcend the thought. Now you have something that's accessing that's more real. And that is where you can have a relationship heart to heart with the one that you lost. And you have a newer, deeper, more permanent relationship with the person that you loved by actually allowing this process of grief to take you to the pain, through the pain, and allow it to really happen so you can find yourself, it's almost like when they left us, they bored a hole into aspects of our heart that we never would have had access to before. And that's the beauty of what they give back. And in the wisdom years, you just take that wisdom and teach it to your grandkids. Well, when they pass, that wisdom is like exponential. And now that wisdom is saying, here's one more lesson and gift for you. I'm going to tug on your heart, open you up. And now all you got to do is go through the pain. Can you be strong enough? Can you take a risk to be vulnerable enough? Can you take a risk to let go and feel and have this relationship with me? Because it's available to you whenever and forever.
Mm. Mm. And do you think that Ayurveda views that relationship that you're having with this person or entity, animal, tree that has passed on, is that a projection of your emotional state and your meditation practice, perhaps? What I'm getting at, what I want to dig a little in, I know that, I don't know in Ayurveda, but in India, reincarnation is a believed and agreed upon thing that happens. And so I have they're colliding thoughts here, but I've talked to a couple of other energy medicine practitioners on this podcast about communicating with people who have passed on. And a little bit different than like a meditation feeling state, but an actual like communication where you're getting information that you couldn't have, or people that get information from people that have died that they couldn't have known. I'm sure you've read those books or those studies and seen that, post-life experiences. So I'm wondering if that is an aspect of these ancient traditions. And the other piece that I want to fish for in that is that quote that you just read about why pandemics started 2,500 years ago. Were they like projecting into the future? Did they like fish into the, the field, right? The Akashic record that exists and like pull out that piece of information and drop it in 2,500 years ago? And it's literally exactly what they said. So can you talk a little bit about that, the veils being thin and the reality of that, all of it?
Yeah. Well, I really feel like that's why I love Ayurveda so much, is because I don't understand how they could have been so prophetic. How did they know that what you just said about the pandemics? How did they know how to take milk and make it into ghee, which is now a massive superfood? It's the highest source of butyric acid that heals the gut and creates the microbiome. How did they know that there was a microbiome? They talked about krimi, which are invisible bacteria in the Rig Veda, which goes back 6,000 years ago. How do they know that there were invisible bugs? They couldn't see they were invisible. How can you? We can't see them today. They didn't have microscopes back then. How did they know that there were circadian rhythms that make whales migrate and birds fly south and leaves turn red and fall off trees? That everything is, our biological clocks are totally dependent on that. And they wrote about that in great detail, when you should eat, when you should sleep, when you should exercise. How did they know? I feel like the whole thing was some like download from the Akashic record, where when you go off into that whole world of underlying fields of intelligence that become the physiology, that we are really these intelligent fields. And there are fields that existed before the Big Bang. And when the Big Bang happened, that's when space and time started. That was when everything started to expand. So time started when the Big Bang happened. But there were fields, according to good research, that were existed before the Big Bang, before space and time. And those are the Akashic fields that are well understood. Even in quantum physicists believe that there were these fields, and that and those fields, which are intelligent, that manifest everything that we see, are interacting with us all the time. So our thoughts are going into the field, and based on our thoughts and our impressions, that field is learning and having impressions. And we, of course, are responding to that field. So we have little antennas that are they're feeling, experiencing those fields, and that sort of morphs us in a certain way. We're sort of a really products of that Akashic field and the impressions that have been uploaded from that field, and then we download from that field. So this underlying quantum field of intelligence that records everything is communicating with us on a regular basis, which is a little bit of a scary thought when you think about that field is getting all of our thoughts. Hey, that's really bad, for the field. But that's sort of that very, very subtle relationship. And that if we allow ourselves to explore a little bit of inner space and find that silent center, we can find ourselves having an experience of that field. Like when I meditate in the morning, I always wake up in the morning, I go outside. When it's really cold, I'll go sit in the hot tub and I'll meditate in the hot tub, or even if it's snowing out. And because we live out in the country and it's like so still, it's like you can cut it with a knife. And my goal when I meditate is to experience the silence of the space around me, and then take that silence and feel the silence of the space inside of me, and then blur the lines between the two, where I don't feel any difference between the silent space inside of me and the silent space around me, because that silent presence is the field. And we can feel it, not think it. We can feel it. So I allow myself in my meditation with my eyes open, because I can want to see and feel the silence. but I also put with my eyes closed so I can actually just feel the science and then blur those lines where you begin to realize that that field on the outside, that real silent, still morning, sunrise feeling is on the inside of you as well. And it never leaves us, but we forget about it. We get pushed out into the winds of the storm. And we lose the memory of the field. And that's, of course, what the Vedas said was the cause of disease is when the field becomes us. And then our physiology forgets that it is part of that field. We start functioning independent of the actual field. And so that's the beauty of it. So I do think that there is the ability for us to download incredible creative intelligence. And I think that's where so much of the inventions, these creative people on this planet, they're downloading inspirational thoughts, creative intelligence is coming through them. And then they bring it into reality and make it into a manifest something. And yes, reincarnation is a thing. I'm a big fan of, I've had some great experiences personally with people who've passed away, having relationships with my dad and my mother-in-law who lived with us for 18 years, really crazy, funny experiences. My wife is really into, we just went to see Matt Fraser. I don't know if you know who he is, but if you ever want to listen to the absolute best one who can talk to the dead, his name is Matt Fraser, really crazy, amazing guy. He's the best of the best. And so I've had direct objective experiences. There's just no way anybody can tell me and convince me that that's not real. It's very, very real. I think that communication with those folks, I kind of feel like there's such a lot of people when they pass are attached to this world still. So there's still that level of communication for a while there. But it's not really the end goal is for not to have it to die and then be sitting there going, telling everybody that you're here and you're sorry. Yeah, that's great for a while, but that's not the goal of our spirit. It's so much bigger than that. But I do think it does. The people who can have that ability to connect those experiences up are doing a great service to let us know that there's a lot more in the subtle that we often ignore. And in Ayurveda, my favorite saying is that the more subtle it is, the more powerful it is. And we should really begin to look at the more subtle because that's where the magic happens.
I can't think of a better sentence to end this on. The more subtle, that's where the magic happens. I'm still bubbling over with thoughts and ideas, but I'd rather end it on that brilliant piece of wisdom from you and maybe get you come back sometime again to talk about more of these. What a beautiful conversation about longevity and then what happens afterwards. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today, Dr. John.
Oh, Lauren, thank you. You have a way of bringing out the best in me. I don't generally talk about these things very much. In podcasts, it's usually pretty surfacey, cool Ayurvedic stuff, but you obviously have an incredibly deep understanding of all this, and it's magical to have this conversation with you. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And we're going to let you all know how to get in touch with Dr. John. His website, lifespa.com, is probably one of the top 5 that I visit most often. So much information that he generously gives for free. And if you want to learn how to live to be 180, check out his website. Thanks, Dr. John. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Alrighty, Energy fans, that's a wrap on another positively charged episode of Energy Works. Lauren, this is the part where we get to use our energy puns.
It's been electrifying, hasn't it, Flame? We hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have.
If you're feeling amped up and you want to keep your energy flowing, be sure to hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform.
And we'd love to hear from you, so please take a moment to leave us a review. Your feedback helps us continue to deliver content that resonates, so light up our inbox.
and spark a conversation with your friends to tell them about us. And we'll see you next time on Energy Works.